guess what? I'm the best thing Carson Wentz has ever had going for him. You know why? You don't think this is going to piss him off even more? You don't think this is going to motivate him even more to stick this up someone's little tail and just say, hey, listen, pal, you're wrong. Everybody else that believes what you said and wrote was wrong.
Selfish, uncompromising, egotistical. Those were the words Joseph Santoliquito used to describe Carson Wentz in his scathing article about the 26-year-old quarterback a couple weeks ago. And judging by that little bit there to start this video, the only one who sounds selfish, uncompromising, and egotistical is one Mr. Joseph Santoliquito. Carson Wentz responds. He held a little mini press conference with select reporters yesterday, talked about this article, and I love the way he handled it. He didn't back down. He didn't run away from it. He embraced it. He didn't call it fake news. Instead, he agreed with some of the things. He showed humility. He took accountability and explained how, could have been a better teammate. There were other things, though, that, Carson Wentz didn't agree with. He didn't think that he was the reason why the offense short-circuited. He didn't think that he bullied Mike Groh. Really downplayed that. Basically said that, they would have heated discussions. So, there it is. And let's get into some of the quotes right now, because, the quotes are available if you want to look at them. The whole transcript is available. But I'm going to show it anyway. So, I'm going to go through some things and just kind of talk about some of these quotes. So, here's the first thing. In terms of, were some of the things said that were truthful in terms of the selfishness. And here's what Carson Wentz says. Well, I think just some of it seems like forever ago. I'm trying to remember exactly what was said, but like some of the selfishness and that stuff, well, yeah, I'll be the first to admit I can be selfish. We're all kind of stubborn in our own right to liking certain plays or liking certain things our way. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I am over the top with that. Am I over the top? Okay, sorry, I read that wrong. Okay, am I ever over the top with that? Like, can I be better? Kind of still be stubborn, but with humility more, and just little things like that. But at the same time, just how I treat my teammates, all those things, it just caused me to kind of reflect. I'll be straight up. It hasn't been the easiest last year for me on the physical level, just battling the injuries, but then just personally going through it, sitting on the sideline and then playing and then sitting on the sideline again. So I realized, like, I maybe wasn't the greatest teammate at times because I was emotionally kind of all over the place. To the outside world, I probably didn't show it much, but internally, I mean, you're definitely fighting some sort of emotions as you guys would probably expect. So there's things to learn just about how to handle myself in certain situations, but nothing really specific from that other than what I just shared. The thing about this article that was written, it's like, all right, selfishness, stubbornness, okay, all right, like A-type personalities, they're going to be like that. But it was the way, again, that this article was written. It was like an attack on Carson Wentz's character. The other side of the story wasn't written. It was just one-sided. And that's why I had such a problem with it. When I talked to Matt Mullen of the Philly Voice and, talking a little bit even with Evan Lacey, or listening to Evan Lacey on the Mike Missinelli show. So it sounded like what they were trying to get at was the emotions and the frustrations that Carson Wentz was feeling, having to, sit on the sideline for the Super Bowl, having to sit on the sideline when Nick Foles won the Super Bowl, having to go through all that, drama during the offseason, the rehabilitation. And it seemed like they were trying to show that, Carson Wentz was human, that he gets frustrated just like every one of us. But this article was just not written like that. It was just the complete opposite. And that's why, obviously, we despised it so much. All right, so in terms of the Mike Groh, bullying Mike Groh, resisting the Folesy stuff, Here's what Carson Wentz had to say about that. The fact that bullying might grow and I talked to each other that day when it came out. I think we all know that never took place. I even go back to the year before with Frank Reich. I know that Frank has gone and said that he and I used to have those competitive arguments, but they're healthy. That stuff happens. That's, I think, what good football teams have, the ability to respectfully do that and kind of be stubborn in those things. It was the same way it would grow. In my opinion, he is a very good football mind, and in my opinion, I feel like I have something to contribute too. So I thought we had some really healthy dialogue. To say, quote, bullied him, I'd say that's kind of disrespectful to Grow. I don't think anyone bullies Coach Grow. And then B, I think we have a great relationship, and it's going to keep getting better. That line, I was kind of blown away with that, with what that would have meant. And then the idea of running Foles' stuff, we both see the game differently to some extent. But to say I was resistant to running his stuff and then vice versa, there's so many things to the X's and O's of the game. To just say a blanket statement like that just doesn't necessarily do it justice. We both like different concepts, but overall we're running really similar stuff, and we kind of base it off what's the defense giving us. It's such a blanket statement that there's too many intricacies to that don't necessarily apply. All right, and then, kind of continuing here about heated arguments and examples of how those play itself out. Carson Wentz says, not to go into specifics, but there's plenty of times throughout the week where we're like, each coach is responsible for certain parts of the game plan, and then I'll watch film and I'll bring a play. So it's third down, I'll bring it to the coach who works on the third down stuff. I'll bring up a play, and then I'll try to get it installed, for example. And there's different levels to getting it into the game plan. Obviously, Doug's got to sign off on it at the end of the day. Maybe I'll show some film. This is why I think it will work. And then they'll show, but what if we get this? This is why it doesn't work. Stuff like that. You can do that for every single play. It's kind of this. You want to be on the same page with the coaches. At the end of the day, on game day, you usually are. But throughout the week, there's those little things like, I'm not feeling that play, coach. This is what they're showing coverage-wise in that situation. I don't see it. So sometimes we'll take that play out, or we'll just talk through it. And you could view those as arguments, but really I think it's just for the betterment of the team. We know we're actually getting somewhere and it's productive, and I think it's really healthy. I think the coaches would say the same thing. So here's the thing about sources and like stuff like that. So whoever said that Carson Wentz was bullying Mike Groh, I mean, look, everybody is going to have a different perception and vantage point of a certain event. It reminds me of the Jimmy Butler report from a couple weeks ago where, like, the source was like, yeah, he was really standoffish with Brett Brown, in a film session. But you talk to Brett Brown was like, no, I like having those discussions. I like having those healthy arguments, so, both the player and coach can kind of grow from it. Mike grow from it. Pun not intended, but I'll say it was. So there you go. It's like, I don't see the problem with a healthy discussion in trying to, make sure that the play is going to work. There's nothing wrong with that. So there it is. All right. Next thing. Carson Wentz says he's not changing his personality. This is who he is. This is how he's gotten here. He ain't changing. Here's what he said. Yeah, I think for one, I'm 26 years old. My personality to some extent ain't going to change. What's gotten me here, what's gotten me successful, I'm not going to say, oh, now I'm going to have this free-spirited Cali guy vibe. That's just not going to change. So to answer your question, I think you're to some extent correct. The type A mindset, there's things to learn. There's a fine line. Anytime you're a type A guy, there's a fine line being pushy and shovey and humble and humility and walking that line. Definitely learning to navigate that always and never trying to look down on anybody or make it seem like I'm better than anybody. But at the same time, as a type A, so to speak, confident person that's confident in off-the-field things and then on the field with what we like, that's not going to change. That's not going to go anywhere. I think that's something that is positive if used correctly. Yes. So there's, that whole thing. I don't want Carson Wentz to change. I want him to be exactly who he is. And, next thing here, Comparing to Nick Foles and kind of being in his shadow, here's what Carson Wentz had to say about that. Again, it's something, there's nothing you can do about it. For one, I love Nick. Nick and I are great friends and strong believers, and we have the same values and everything. We'll be the first to say that we are different, like how we go about our lives. I've learned some things from him. I know he's learned some of the things from me. But we'd be the first to say our personalities are kind of different. But that's why I think we are such good friends to some extent as well. And so that's off topic a little bit, but that stuff I can't worry about. That so-called shadow or whatever you want to call it, I can't let that bother me. I know what I'm capable of on the field. I know what I've done in the past. And I know where I envision this team going. And so I don't really worry about what's happened in the past, the shadow, the pressure, the stress. There's plenty of it, whether that's from living in, quote, that shadow or whatever. There's plenty of stress and pressure here that you try and block out as much as you can. So there's, that sort of thing. And, again, just kind of natural stuff there from Carson Wentz. In terms of initial reactions, poor Carson was eating breakfast, and he was about to go read his Bible when Joseph Santoliquito's article came out. You do not mess with Carson Wentz's Bible time, Joseph. Blasphemy. You shall not do that again. You think you're going to disrupt Tim Tebow's Bible time? No. You ain't disrupting Carson Wentz's either. All right. So what was Carson Wentz's initial reaction to the article? Well, here's what he said. Without a doubt, you read it and you're frustrated because you're like, what? It kind of came out of nowhere. It was just a regular off season. I was literally eating breakfast with my wife, and John texted me. John, by the way, is the PR guy for the Eagles. Literally, we do like quiet time in the morning. We eat breakfast, and then I go sit on the couch. So I'm about to go read my Bible, and then I get that text, and now I'm reading this. I was going to read my Bible, and now I'm reading this. It kind of changed my attitude a little bit. But just talking to some teammates that talked to me about it, tried to just figure out why and what we can do to resolve it. But then at the end of the day, I was like, I went to bed and just with the next day. I don't turn on the radio. I don't read the papers. I've been off of Twitter for a while other than posting tweets. So I try not to let that tie me down. But again, the real element of it, just learning. If there is truth in this, where can I improve as a teammate and as a player and all that? And that's what I love about Carson and the way that he's handling this is like, he's going to take this and he's going to learn from it. He's going to be humble about it. He's going to, take the lessons and try to be a better man, a better leader, a better teammate because of it. All right. So now there was a question about the uniqueness of his situation, the fact that he had to endure everything that he had to endure physically, emotionally during the offseason. Here was Carson Wentz's answer to that. That's a good question. It's kind of multi-layered a little bit just because, you go through the first injury and you're just kind of 100% determined to get back. That's like why my mind is on. And looking backwards, there are things that maybe I neglected as a teammate and as a friend because I was just so determined, and that's all that mattered. It was tough because anytime you're hurt, you're really not with the team as much. You're in the training room more at practice. You guys saw me in the spring. I was on the other field doing conditioning or sprints or whatever I was working on. So kind of just have this element of being separate a little bit. So there are just elements of that as far as being a teammate that you get so focused on just getting the knee right or getting back that you can miss out on the human side of things and the personal side of being a teammate and being around your brothers and spending time and all that. So there's that element, and I definitely kind of look back on where there are moments or where there are opportunities that I just kind of neglected because I was just wanting to be healthy first. And so there's things that you look back and you're like, okay, that's something I can't lose sight of. Whether you're going through an injury or you're always 100% healthy, just being the same person, I'm going to always strive to be the best I can be on the field, but just not letting those kind of circumstances change my attitude, if that makes any sense a little bit. It kind of it kind of some extent learning just how to handle the different levels of adversity and pressure that come with it, and not to let it shake me to some extent and change my approach more than anything. So Carson Wentz, those are the best of the bets in terms of the quotes. There is actually one more that I wanted to get that I forgot to copy and paste there in my little Microsoft Word article. Where is it? Okay. So there was also one more question that was asked, and Carson was kind of talking about how he wishes that the locker room it was handled kind of better. He wishes that he would have done this more in house. And all right, so here's the answer to that question. Have you encountered any friction in the locker room or sentiment that would suggest what came up in that story? Carson Wentz's answer: not really. Not to get into details about the story or the things that were in that, but no, I hadn't felt that way. Again, I think every guy in that locker room would say we have a great, very close locker room. I think everyone can be honest with each other, hold each other accountable, does this and that, and we have an issue. Usually we resolve it as brothers, as the family that we are. It's why I think myself and a handful of other guys were just confused that it came out like that. If there were problems, we just usually handle it, and it doesn't come out the way that it did. I think it bothers me because of that, not because it's me. But if that was about another teammate, in all of our opinion in that locker room, anything that might have friction in the locker room doesn't need to come through the media. It should stay in the house. We should be able to handle that stuff in the locker room ourselves. So there you go. And I agree. You don't go to the media. If you got a problem with Carson, you go to Carson and you talk to him himself. Not really hard there. So there it is. Another interesting tidbit that Joseph Santoliquito did point out today. He was saying that Carson Wentz was having trouble sitting down prior to the Vikings game. It sounded like this back injury was a big deal, and if you want to say that Carson Wentz was selfish because he tried to push through this back injury, okay, all right. I can get where you're coming from there. But, again, it goes back to the tone of the article and the way that these words were presented. They weren't presented in this type of light. They were presented in such a negative light, and that's why there was such a negative reaction to this article that was written. So hopefully finally some closure to this freaking story and all this nonsense. Carson Wentz speaks out. He handled it beautifully. I'm Adrian Fedkiw, and I'm out.